Pursuant to Internal Revenue Service guidance, be advised that any federal tax advice contained in this program is not intended to be used, and it cannot be used by any person or entity for the purpose of avoiding any tax penalties that may be imposed by the Internal Revenue Service or any other U.S. federal taxing authority or agency, or promoting, marketing, or recommending to another party any transaction or matter addressed in this show. The opinions expressed by the host and the guests are their own and may not be used as authoritative advice. Any use of this material without the written consent of the host is strictly prohibited.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy, on AM 560, The Answer. Tune in every week at 5 for an informative discussion about IRS obligations, credit card debt, mortgage default, collection activity, and how to resolve these legal issues using tax resolution, debt settlement, mortgage loan modification, foreclosure defense, and bankruptcy. Your host is Stephen Leahy, and the principal at Open Tax Resolutions and the Law Office of Stephen Leahy, PC. Stephen is the author of Deal with Your IRS Problems Today. IRS and debt issues are serious, but there is hope. There are resolutions. So get ready and take notes during the IRS Radio Hour. And now, here's your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy.
Hello, Chicago, and welcome to the second edition of the IRS Radio Hour. I am your host, Stephen Leahy, as the gentleman just said on the introduction.
What's your name?
Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge today's Sunday, Mother's Day. So I wanted to wish everybody, all the mothers in my life, except for you, Jim, a happy Mother's Day, and all the listeners and who are mothers, or I'm sure everybody has a mother. Happy Mother's Day to all of them. So we're going to get started here. First, I want to introduce my co-host, Jim Leahy.
Thank you very much, and ditto on Mother's Day. And to all, well, since our mothers are the same, we have to just say hello to everybody and welcome everybody back.
I don't think everybody understood that we had the same mother, though, Jim.
Well, I believe you just said my name is Jim Leahy and your name is Steve Leahy.
But we could be cousins.
Well, okay, well, we're not cousins. So now, Steve, speaking of that, over this last
Segways
week...
are for children.
Yeah, well, that's Segways are for kids. Speaking of that, this last week, since you and I have been doing this radio show, I've been noticing more and more that there are commercials all over the radio and television for this kind of service that we're offering here. And, it's like when you learn a new word, all of a sudden you notice that it's everywhere. And I think that it's important that you, being who you are, to explain to people why it's different for you, for them to come to you than it would be to go to these other people who are all over the media now, Facebook and on the radio and on television, like I said. So I think that it's a good time for us to explain to people what makes you different than the other people.
Well, because I am in this business, I see it a lot, and it's been tax resolution is a fairly new animal. It wasn't always around. There was a time when the IRS would not even work anything out with you. They wanted their money. They wanted it tomorrow, and they would take everything that you owed, if you couldn't pay them. Owned, I should say, if you could not pay them. But they came up with this program. One of the first programs they came up with was what they call the offer in compromise. And this was a groundbreaking in that the IRS would agree to take less than you owed them in order to settle the debt. And so when these new programs came out, a cottage industry was born, and a lot of CPAs were doing this, a lot of doing this, which means tax resolution services. And there was a national push. So there was a gentleman named J.K. Harris. And J.K. Harris was one of the first national firms. J.K. Harris has since been put out of business. There was another one that was very large, and her name was Ronnie Deutsch, and she was from California. And she also has since been put out of business. There was another real big one that probably people remember as Tax Masters. He had television commercials everywhere, and he also has been put out of business. But there are some that are still in business, and I hear them a lot on Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. And
are all these businesses attorneys? And I know we've kind of gone over this before, but maybe for our newer listeners, you could tell them why it's more important to have an attorney than, say, a CPA. doing this?
Well, I think a lot of them do have attorneys working for them, but they're not law firms. And so they don't carry this attorney-client relationship and the privilege that goes with attorney-client relationship. And so, again, there's a lot of these national firms now, and they do a lot of radio, they do a lot of television commercials, and they get a lot of business. And for some people, that might be the right thing. When you call them, you're actually talking to a salesperson, and you're not really talking to an attorney. When you call my office, I'm local, so most of the people that come to see me say, I wanted to sit down in front of somebody and talk to them. I didn't want to talk to someone from California, because if I have a question or I have a concern, how am I going to get in touch with them? How am I going to go to California? And so I'd rather have somebody that's here in Chicago that I can meet with and see face to face and look at them in the eye, and also know the person that's really in charge of getting the job done, and that's resolving the IRS issue.
Well, one of your specialties is technology, isn't it? Do you have a...
Well, you use the term specialty, so I can't use this as an attorney here in Illinois. You can't say I'm a specialist on anything, so I'm not a specialist.
I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't know that.
That's why I'm telling you this. So as an attorney, attorneys can't specialize in anything. But I do have a degree in information technology law, and so I know that area of the law fairly well. I don't know if you knew that, Jim. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, it's true.
I did not know that.
And I have that degree hanging on my wall at my office. Matter of fact, but so I know a lot about technology and privacy issues, and of course, privacy issues have a huge impact in IRS resolutions, because if I'm sending my IRS personal information to somebody in California, how do I know that it's being taken care of and that's being protected? We hear a lot about ID theft, and especially with IRS ID theft. It's a huge issue now.
I've been hearing that people are losing their returns. Everything is on your returns, and anybody would need to take over your identity. And identity theft is a big problem, but we'll get into it. What I was thinking about would be, what if I can't make it downtown to your offices, but I'd like to? Can you still meet with you face to face?
Well, you can, and I've been using a online service for some time about. It's called Connect Now. It's an Adobe.
Ding, 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 ding.
I wish I had a belt to get the promotion.
Remind me to call them.
But I've been using that service for some time, and it's changes every so often. But I have a whiteboard on there. I have you can look at my screen, and I can see your screen. We can sign documents. There is a camera. Most people now have cameras at their house, a webcam or something.
What if I don't have one? What would you do?
Then I can send you one. We email it, or we'll mail it out.
You would do that for me?
Absolutely, because I think it's that important that we can have a face-to-face conversation and talk about your issues, because everybody's different. Everybody's got a different story, and everybody's got a different issue. So that's how we go about it. That's a great. But that is a great tool to have, and the technology now gives lawyers, and actually, obviously any other business, but it gives lawyers a connection that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Would they cost me any extra to do it that way?
Well, no, it doesn't cost anything extra. Sometimes it gets a little bit cumbersome, but when I tell people if there's a pause or something, it's much easier to have a pause on this online service than driving all the way downtown and trying to park and coming in to see me. So it can be a little bit cumbersome, but it works. But it actually works great. And after every online consultation, I always ask everybody, how did that work? How did that work for you? And they, to a person, they said, this was just great. I just thought it was a wonderful way to see an attorney and feel comfortable meeting somebody.
And all that is secure information. You're not worried about it getting out over the web and like I said, I think mostly that would be probably cheaper. You save money on parking, especially going downtown. So there's an option there that should be that people should know about. And
that's right. And it's more than just the initial consultation, and that often we have questions we want to meet. You want to meet with your lawyer, and maybe we meet initially up together face to face. But then later you have a question, so we can meet on this on my online meeting room, and we can discuss your case online. And again, we can look at the same documents. We can review things together. I can point things out. We can. It's a great tool.
All right. Well, but you do offer parking, don't you?
Actually, what I do is we validate. So you get a discounted rate.
Well, that's very important. I didn't want to make anybody think that there was no parking.
There's plenty of parking down because my office is at Michigan Avenue and Randolph in downtown Chicago, so it's easy to park. But so this is I wanted to go on to the next segment. The next segment, I think we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about next, Jim?
Bankruptcy. We're going to go into the history of it, maybe give them a little bit of background and things on bankruptcy that people might not know about, and kind of take some of the tarnish off of, how it looks.
Well, that's great. And we're here every Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock.
Welcome back to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy. Stephen has helped hundreds of Chicagoans recover from financial disaster, and he wants to help you and your family. There are resolutions, and you will hear about all those resolutions during today's informative discussion on the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560 The Answer. Now, here's your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
Welcome back. Before we get started, I wanted to talk about if you have a question that we're not addressing, to send us an email. You can send me an email at questions@irsradiohour.com.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's the chicagotaxteam.com. There's a blog there, and I recently wrote an article.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to ask you about that article, and you're cutting into...
What a coincidence.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Before we went away, we were talking about... Oh, and again, happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. And we were talking about transitioning over to talk about bankruptcy. And I was asking you today, we were talking, it was surprising to find out the history of it, to me. And I know I'm not going to say that it's not... There's so many negative connotations to it, and there's so many. I just wanted people to. I think that people would be interested in knowing a lot of the background or the stories that you came up with.
Well, this is important because when people come to see me and we start talking about it, even with IRS problems, oftentimes bankruptcy is an option. It's not always the right solution, but it is an option, and so we talk about it. And often people get uncomfortable because I'm never going to even consider bankruptcy. It's a terrible thing. I've always paid my bills on time. I've always been a honest, upfront person, and I don't think bankruptcy is like that. And so in my office, I have a bust of Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe. And I always point to Abraham Lincoln. I said, did you know that Honest Abe filed for protection under the bankruptcy laws? And generally people are surprised. And no, I had no idea. He's Honest Abe. How could he? And I just divide. There's two types of obligations that we have. We have legal obligations, and then we have moral obligations. And bankruptcy is designed to protect you from these legal obligations. And Abraham Lincoln understood that. And so before he was involved in politics, he started a little store. And the store he bought with a partner, and that store went bankrupt about a year later. They had a lot of debt. And Abraham Lincoln filed for protection. They took some of his assets and they sold them, but it wasn't enough to pay the debt. And then soon after that, the partner died. Abraham Lincoln took it upon himself, even though he did not have a legal obligation to do so. He took it upon himself to pay back every dime, and by all accounts, he paid back every dime to all of the creditors that he left. And he had no legal obligation to do that. And so again, this is the distinction between my legal obligations and my moral obligations. bankruptcy, when people start taking action against me, they sue me in court. They want to start garnishing my wages. They want to levy my bank account. These types of things. If these types of things happen, then it's going to put you in a greater hole, make it much harder to get out of the hole. And so bankruptcy will give you the legal protection from having to from having these things happen to you, and it will give you the wherewithal and the opportunity to straighten yourself out and get back on your feet. There's nothing in the bankruptcy code that would prevent you from paying back creditors of those debts that were discharged. And so sometimes that by splitting those obligations and making it clear makes it easier for people to kind of understand, the purpose of bankruptcy and how bankruptcy can really help you even in your moral obligations. So it's not a moral a scar on your character to file bankruptcy, as long as you go through with your own moral obligations and you follow through with it.
Bankruptcy is in the Constitution, isn't it?
It is in the Constitution, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. There was at the beginning before the Constitution and in the Articles of Confederation, there was a lot of debate and problems with creditors in different states. And so some states had bankruptcy laws and some states didn't. And if I had a state with a bankruptcy law and I filed bankruptcy in that state, the creditor would merely go to another state and sue me in that state. And so the founders, when they were putting together the Constitution, they wanted to look at putting this right in a national right. The bankruptcy should be a national law. Now, bankruptcy is kind of unique in that it combines federal law with state law. So every state might have different bankruptcy laws. And so that's why you need an attorney that's in your own state. You can't always go on things on the internet about how the law works, because it works differently in different states.
And different companies have different ways of. Some have CPAs doing it or helping you. Some have clerks. They're not all law firms where you have the attorney-client privilege. How important is that? Well,
I think you're talking about IRS resolution rather than bankruptcy, because only a little.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so that's why I'm asking you.
That's good, and so, in bankruptcy, generally you're going to take a lawyer. They do have what they call petition preparers, and these are people that are supposed to just fill in the form, and they're not supposed to give you any legal information. And I think that oftentimes they cross the line and they try to advise people about how the law works, even though they really don't have a knowledge of the law. And so that's important. But what you're talking about is IRS tax resolution. And sometimes even legal firms that have an IRS tax resolution, they don't offer bankruptcy. And bankruptcy is one of the key remedies. And I think if you go to a IRS tax resolution attorney and he doesn't offer bankruptcy, I would be suspicious myself, because I think that you need to have all the tools available to you to resolve the problem. And so if I don't offer that and it happens to be the best option for me and I'd never even hear about it, well, I think that's a problem.
Well, so it's just another tool in the box, but you're saying that it's an important tool that's the one that will help you the best.
Exactly, and because in the end, there's really only 6 things you can do if you owe the IRS money, and that's it. And one of the things, the first thing you can do is if the IRS sends you a bill, you can pay them. Now that's not an option for a lot of people, but I could tell you that if they send you a bill and you pay them, they'll leave you alone.
They'll send you another bill the next year.
Well, if you pay that one, they'll leave you alone again. So the second thing you can do is you can file. They have now what they call installment agreements. And these installment agreements are when you can, they have a couple different types. One's called a full pay, and I just figure out how much I owe and come up with how many months I could pay them, and I divide it, and they pay, and I have to pay them interest, but they'll give me some time to pay them back. And they'll leave me alone while I'm making the payments, as long as I make all the payments on time and I keep what they call stay in compliance, which means in the future I have to keep filing my taxes on time and paying them as they come due.
When do they let the kids go?
As soon as you're finished with the installment agreement. The second type is what they call a partial pay. And a partial pay is when you're going to pay the IRS what you can. So there's a form. It's called the 433 form, and I'm using that because I know what the number is. But there's a form that gathers a lot of financial information about you, and so you have to prove to the IRS, what's left. So this is how much money I make. This is what my bills are. This is what's left at the end of the month, and then you have to dedicate that to payment to the IRS, and they'll agree to take that as long as your financial condition doesn't improve dramatically. They'll agree to take that partial payment. The third thing you can do, we talked a little bit about this last week, and that's what they call a currently not collectible status. And the currently not collectible status I prove to the IRS I don't have any money at the end of every month, and so they're going to leave me alone, and I don't have to pay them anything.
For how long? But eventually you'll have to pay them.
Maybe there is a statute of limitations on how long the IRS can collect a debt, and that's 10 years. And now deciding what the 10 years is, that's tricky, but that's something we can talk about.
I remember last week you said that 10 years doesn't start until you file. So it's not like you can go disappear for 10 years, come out and say, it's been 10 years.
That's exactly.
Then they say, well, it's not 10 years because you haven't filed it.
That's right.
Now it starts today.
So the next thing you can do is you can file bankruptcy. And again, bankruptcy is an option, and it's something you should look at always whenever you have a tax.
One of the options is not jumping off the roof.
No, but the sixth option is what a lot of people do before they come to see me, and that's they do nothing. And you can continue to do nothing, but then you're going to get in trouble. So now so you should call me if you have a tax problem. If you have unfiled returns, call me 312-664-6649. We're here every Sunday at 5:00. I think we decided it's afternoon, and
in the summer.
5:00 in the afternoon in the summer. That's correct. And on the other side, we have some more information for you. So again, ChicagoTaxTeam.com for answers.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy on AM 560. The Answer. Attorney Stephen Leahy brings his passion and expertise to your radio each and every week during the IRS Radio Hour. Tune in, take notes, and be educated. Learn your options resolving financial obstacles that face so many. And now, back to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy.
Welcome back. In that clip there, they talk about my passion. And sometimes my passion gets in the way of answering the question.
Well, okay. We have plenty of time to go back and answer the questions again. And speaking of asking
because we're going to be here again next week.
Joe. You know it at 5:00 in the afternoon in the summer. And it's 5:00 at night in the winter because we all know it's dark by then.
That's correct.
All of us homemade Chicagoans here. And the one thing I will say is Happy Mother's Day again.
Well, you say that every segment.
Well, there's new listeners coming and going. We hope that we can keep you, but all the new listeners, welcome. I have some questions. I was going over one of the news stories, and someone brought up the fact that they had to make quarterly payments to the IRS, and I thought, first thing is how normal is that? Who has to pay quarterly payments? And why? How do you know that you're one of the ones who would have to? Will the IRS tell you that, or is this something that you need an attorney to tell you? Well, why don't you go into it a little bit?
Well, most people who work are W-2 employees, which means that your employer takes your money. They pay you, and then they deduct. They deduct your taxes. They deduct your Social Security. They deduct your Medicare, and then they send that money into the government. But some people work as 1099 employees, and 1099 employees are often referred to as independent contractors. As you might suspect, the IRS doesn't like that. The 99 employee. They prefer everybody to be a W-2 employee. Also, when you run your own business, you don't get a paycheck often, although you could. That's something we could talk about later. But a lot of people who run their own business as sole practitioners, they gather money by the from their vendors or from their customers, and they don't give any to the IRS right away. So at the end of the year, they did figure out how much they owe, and then they have to pay that amount that they owe. when you owe money to the IRS at the end of the year, so for instance, I may owe them $12,000 at the end of the year. And if that's what I owed them, then the IRS would expect me to pay a quarter of that every quarter, so 25%. So that what they don't realize is that everybody's business isn't level. Okay, so my business may be in a fall where I gather a lot of money. For instance, I have a client who is a tax preparer. Believe it or not, they have tax problems too, and the tax preparer is between January and April does a very robust business, but after April, not so much. And so he has to be very careful in when he pays the IRS, because maybe in the fall his quarterly payments come due and he can't make them. Now, generally, if you make the payments at the end of the year, you're going to be okay. But technically, if you don't make your quarterly payments, then you're late, and they can assess a penalty against you for not filing your quarterly taxes on time.
Will they send you a kind of a thing of what they're expecting you to pay? I mean, who decides, what that rate will be and how much?
Well, this is generally done with your taxes in the prior year. So if I do for instance, the 2013 taxes that were just due, when I complete my 2013 taxes and there's a balance due, there'll be your CPA or even TurboTax will print up a voucher for you, and they just have the IRS's address on it. It'll tell you how much you have to pay. And again, even TurboTax will spit out this voucher, and then every quarter you're supposed to pay whatever that voucher amount is and send it to the IRS.
So it's not written in stone on if you pay it, how much. My question would be is that if at the end of the year they get what's owed to them, I mean, would they assess penalties on me? Would they come after me? Would they say stop doing that again? Don't do it again? Or
well, the answer is that generally doesn't happen. Where they generally won't come after you. But again, technically they could. But if you file on time, you're with millions of people, and it kind of can get lost. They're not picking everybody out. And maybe that's something we'll talk about about who they pick out to audit. And that's
another show coming up. So you'll come back next week.
That's true. So one of the so anyway, the quarterly, again, there's these vouchers that you're supposed to pay at the end of every quarter. If you pay the IRS at the end of the year, you're probably going to be okay, but you're better off to pay the quarterly as they come due.
Well, which is why it's good for you to have an attorney and somebody to give you this advice. And they would probably not come after you if, in fact, you refer them to your attorney and when they have questions about why you didn't pay or why you were less amounts of money. So there's another reason why you should be with your attorney.
Well, I'm always saying that people should hire a lawyer, Jim. So that's what I think. So, but this is the IRS Radio Hour. We're here at AM 560, The Answer. We're here every Sunday evening or afternoon, I think. And so we want you to join us. You can visit my website at chicagotaxteam.com. Lots of answers to questions there. Or call me at 312-664-6649. And we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Welcome back to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy. Stephen has helped hundreds of Chicagoans recover from financial disaster, and he wants to help you and your family. There are resolutions, and you will hear about all those resolutions during today's informative discussion on the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560 The Answer. Now, here's your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
And we're back. Stephen Leahy here on AM 560 The Answer. And last week we were talking about the targeting of individuals, and we asked people to contact us if they thought they were targeted. And it's what a coincidence that it's been in the news again this week.
Yeah, that's what we were going to bring it up. And remember, where should they contact us if they do have a situation or they want somebody to know or have questions?
You can send me an email at questions@irsradiohour.com. And or you can go to my website, chicagotaxteam.com. There's a form there. You can contact me through that, or you can call me 312-664-6649. I have a nice woman who answers my phone, and she'll be happy to set up a time for us to talk.
Well, and this week we find out that the IRS not only was going after the people, the Tea Party groups of on their own, they were going into their privacy, going against the privacy rules and asking for their donor lists. And some of the people, of course, they're normal American taxpayers. When the government asks you to do something, you do it. So they sent their donor lists in, and the donors started getting audited. 10% of the Tea Party donors, not the Tea Parties, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the donors.
Exactly.
I mean, this is using government to beat people over the head. Who's going to give money to groups if you know that just because I do, I'm going to be audited? Well,
in all of this, when it becomes public, and that's why people don't like to have their donations to be public. I mean, you look at Firefox in California, the gentleman loses his job because he donated some money to a group, and those group donations should have been protected. But after the fact, they decided not to protect them, and they let those donor lists go. And this happens all the time with people who are contacted by the IRS that owe the IRS. Oftentimes, the IRS will ask you for things that you don't have to give them. But if you voluntarily give it to them, well, then there's no foul.
Well, I want to get back to the story again, but I remember last week you told me what was the most important thing. Don't speak to the IRS. Why is that?
Well, again, just like we were just talking about, because they will ask you for things, and if you voluntarily give it, you don't know what you can give them and what you don't have to give them. And so when they ask you to give them things and you voluntarily give it to them, well, there's no foul, and they can use it against you, and they will use it against you.
So even when you call them on your own, when you get that letter and you call them, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? What do you want me to do? They will start asking you questions.
Absolutely.
They will ask you things that your attorneys probably will tell you it's none of their business. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, just because they have the IRS next to to their name, mm-hmm. doesn't mean that they have the right to go into your privacy, to be able to ask you for these. They have the right to ask you, but you have the right to say
no. Absolutely true. And usually, again, that's why if you call the IRS and they asking you for things and you're voluntarily giving them, and they will use it against you. And again, if you don't know what the rules are, then you're going to be caught in like a deer in the headlights because you didn't know that I didn't have to give it to them. One of the things, I do have a DVD that I give people that has the 3 things that you should never tell the IRS. Mm-hmm. Do the one of them is.
And how would I get that DVD?
Well, you can. It's on ChicagoTaxTeam.com. You can look at it there, but I can send you a DVD too if you contact my office at 312-664-6649. Ask us to send out a package of information, and we'll send you out a package. I also send you a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today, and it has a lot of good information in there about how to deal with your IRS problem, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And again, one of the things is you shouldn't answer questions from the IRS unless you know exactly what the answer is. Don't guess. Don't suppose, because they'll hold you to those questions. And don't lie to them, because that's a huge thing. If you start lying to the IRS, that might be perjury, and you're putting your freedom in jeopardy. Never do that. Never, never, never. And how you do that? Don't talk to them. Get a lawyer to talk to them.
It just shows how dangerous that it is. I mean, the American people, it is unbelievable to me how many people actually follow these rules and pay their taxes without being chased down. To have it now, to find out that people are abusing this power for political reasons, and that's the reason. I mean, that's there right now. They say that Nixon did it, or during the 70s, but right now, what's coming out it's scary to think about what they can do to you. And the fact is, there are a lot of people in this state and in our listening area who are Tea Party members, who are starting Tea Parties. All they want to do is stand up for their rights. And the fact is, they're using their own patriotism against them, and they're trying to get people to just be quiet. And the fact is, they shouldn't be quiet. You have rights, and you should be able to stand up for your rights.
Well, I agree with that. And one of the things that kind of amazed me is one of the target lists was. In the target list was not only patriot, but Constitution. So I'm starting a group about the Constitution, and they're targeting me to say I'm somehow bad, I'm somehow anti-American because I'm concerned about the Constitution of the United States. It's kind of it's amazing.
It just gets scary. I mean, the fact is, like, some people won't they think wearing a flag on your lapel it's a Republican sticker. It's not. It's the fact that I was in the Marine Corps. I wear a flag. It doesn't mean what party I belong to, and I think standing up for rights doesn't pigeonhole me into a party. I think everybody should be worried about this.
I agree. If you have some auditing problems, contact me at 312-664-6649. We're here at 5 o'clock on Sundays, AM 560, The Answer. So, and visit my website, ChicagoTaxTeam.com.
And catch us on the backside.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy on AM 560, The Answer. Attorney Stephen Leahy brings his passion and expertise to your radio each and every week during the IRS Radio Hour. Tune in, take notes, and be educated. Learn your options resolving financial obstacles that face so many. And now, back to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
Guess who? Stephen Leahy. Okay.
What's his name?
They should. I do mention my name a lot in this show, don't I? But that's okay. I want you to know that you can contact me.
And where can I contact you?
You can contact me at my office, and my telephone number is 312-664-6649. You can visit the web at ChicagoTaxTeam.com. You can send a question. So if you have a question, questions at IRSRadioHour.com. That's the email address. So always feel free to send me an email of any of your questions. If you have a question about a specific IRS or any kind of debt issue, someone suing you, somebody in a short sale, foreclosure, loan modifications, any of that kind of issues, I'd be happy to discuss them with you.
Since this is our second show, I think we should kind of go over what we've talked about today, so people who are just coming in at the end, will know that what the show consists of. Okay. We started out talking about all the other companies that are around on the radio, on television,
the national companies
that do this, and why it's better to have somebody from Chicago, a local attorney,
local. I say that a lot in my commercials too.
And then your downtown office location, and how technology is helping you help people without making them come down, or making it a lot easier to be able to do this. And to be able to see your own clients.
It's always about communication. One of the things that people hate about attorneys is they never tell me what's going on in my case. So a big part of my job is communicating with my clients and keeping as many forms of communication as I can. Obviously, I have people that work in my office with me, and many of my clients deal with them a lot more than they deal with me. But I always make myself available to my clients. They always could call me. I always encourage them to contact Bonnie. Bonnie's my scheduler, and Bonnie will always set up a time for people to talk to me. So whether you're a client or not, always set up a time to talk to you. If you want to do it on the phone, you can, and you have a question, call Bonnie. She'll set up a time, 312-664-6649.
And then we talked about a little bit about bankruptcy and a story that's on your blog that you have a blog. Where's your blog located again?
The blog is on the website at ChicagoTaxTeam.com. I wrote an article recently about Abraham Lincoln. So
and a little synopsis of what that was about. That Abraham Lincoln actually filed for bankruptcy.
That's true.
And that bankruptcy is actually in our Constitution. It's a constitutional right of every taxpayer or of everybody to be able to protect themselves from.
That's right. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the United States Constitution. A lot of people don't know that.
Well, I didn't know that. That's very nice. And we got into quarterly payments and how you know that you have to do that, and the importance of having a professional help you through there, and you're reaching out to the IRS. And then we'll have, and then we forgot about
the targeting of.
We were talking about targeted audits.
We didn't talk about Lois Lerner.
But we will do that next week, because I have a feeling that this will be a continuing story. It'll be a continuing saga. as they used to say when I was a kid on Wagon Train. And it looks like next week we'll get into, we didn't have a chance to get into the student loans, and there's a lot of people out there who have problems with student loans. And there's some foreclosure news coming out of Chicago. So we have a lot to talk about. There's and
we're going to have to talk about it next week because we're running out of time. But first I wanted to, again, wish everybody a happy Mother's Day. And especially to all the moms in my life.
Go Blackhawks.
I want to thank Debbie, who's our producer.
Thank you, Debbie.
And she's couldn't do it without her. So I want to thank everybody else here at the station, and thank all you for listening because we couldn't do it without you. So
come on back next week.
That's absolutely true.